All right. Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon to some of you. And today we're going to be talking about guitar show tips and tricks and experiences. And I've invited Isaac Jang and Chris Jenkins to join me. Um, I've been doing guitar shows since the late 1990s. I don't have an exact count about how many guitar shows I've done, but I probably do 2 to 3 shows a year. So you can do the math. I've learned a few things over the years, and there's still some things that I know that I could do better on. And one of the persistent questions that I'd like to address in today's talk is also kind of the counterfactual as to whether the guitar shows are really worth it. And the short answer to that is it really depends. It depends on where you are in your building career, uh, where you are in terms of selling guitars, are you back ordered, what your prices are like, what's your current exposure like. So we'll go over all those things. And uh, so I'll kind of chime in later, but I'd like to start with Isaac. And um, Isaac gave a great presentation at the Northwood Seminar last summer at the Gallup School about this very topic. So I asked him to kind of cover some of the major points of that talk and take it away, Isaac.
Oh, hi, nice to meet you. My name is Isaac, and yeah, thank you for having me on. And I have a limited experience, but just I like to. Michael asked me, and I like to share some of my experience doing the shows, um, and also, apologize. I will have to take off in about 30 minutes, but I will do my best to be part of it and share as much information that I have that I think will be helpful. And Yeah, so I started building guitars I had my very first show in 2015, and m- as an apprentice from 2007 and on, my goal was to get into Hillsbury, and and I attended as an apprentice to that show. And of course, when I first went on as my own guitars, uh, Hillsburg was discontinued. So I was really disappointed and trying to figure out what my future will be. But uh, Sort of figuring out what shows are coming up, I had to really keep my eyes on what my options were. And just around then, a lot of the organizers were trying to figure out what the next show would be, and one of them came as the Memphis Guitar Show, which only happened once, but to me, it was a great vehicle to kind of get into guitar shows. And it was very difficult for me to actually get in because by then I've only had, even though I had apprenticed for many years, I've only had literally one guitar under my own name that I put on the market. So I was talking to the organizer. I was pleading. I was sort of almost begging. I said, "Hey, Bob, I know I only have one guitar under the belt, and you're not inclined to have me on board, but I will make sure that I will not disappoint you, and make sure that I would be part of the great show, and I'll behave." And he sort of, okay, let me think about it. And I actually found out much later that my mentor, Kathy Wingert, had put in a good word for me, and I was accepted. So that show sort of uh, really got me into the next phase of all the guitar shows that I have been able to attend. So I think, uh, first of all, if you're able to, or if you think you are really wanting to go for it, it'll be good to just get that very first show. Just get one show done, and you realize um, it sort of kind of helps you realize yeah, what it takes to do guitar shows, and also helps as a starting builder. For me, it helped me to become a sort of think much more about my business seriously, and it also puts you out there in the world of the best guitars in the market. So uh, some of the things that I sort of went in when I went in to guitar shows, I think the first thing that happened to me was it gave me a reality check on my work. Because if you work in your own shop, even among some of the colleagues, there's you spend so much time in your own work that you kind of lose focus on what's really happening and kind of get a clear, objective view of my work. So when I went, I thought I put in my best work, and then of course you go there and then you start seeing some of the best guitars in the world, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is so embarrassing. Like, why am I even here? So there's some of that, and sort of you're faced with the reality, but also that helped me to uh, sort of really reassess my work, uh, and also hearing feedbacks. Some positive and some of them are more constructive, but that sort of helped me to uh, sort of understand what I need to do next. So it's not a one time thing, but it's more of a in progress uh, sort of a journey that I find to be very helpful. So that's the first part. The second part is it's very easy to fall into the thoughts of just going there with the expectation of selling instrument at the show, which could be which is very natural because you're investing time, energy, and money into going to shows. But it it's a dangerous. Sometimes it can be dangerous and it can be very disappointing. It can burn you out. Um, so if you go there with the expectation sell, if it sells, great. But if it doesn't, it's also always good to remind myself to thinking that it's planting seeds. And even if it doesn't happen at the show or even right after the show, it's still a good experience, and also it's putting my name out there. And so I always go to shows with that mindset, and uh, so I think that's uh, another thing that I've sort of learned as a beginning uh, guitar maker. And another benefit of doing shows, on top of planting seeds, selling instruments, is there's usually a media coverage, whether through a publisher of magazines of different magazines or different online forums, and sometimes it could just be like social media presence that sort of gets blasted through, that sort of helps my brand, my name out there, that people are starting to get familiar uh, sort of over the time. It could be one time, but usually it's better that if it's more consistently throughout. Um, so some I go there because I like taking photos, and I grew up actually sort of seeing a lot of the GAL convention, like videos and photos, as growing up as a guitar maker, and I really wanted to sort of be part of that documentation. So just on my own, I just started to take a lot of photos of builders and guitars. And this is, I was actually having a conversation with Urban the other day that, this is actually the best opportunity for me to document it because all the guitar makers are putting their best work at the time and bringing their best work. So for me to be able to document that at the show, usually tens to hundreds of guitar makers in one spot is actually a great opportunity for me to capture that. So I just started doing that to share on my Instagram and Facebook. And last few years now, Jason Verlinde from Prepper Journal has asked me to be part of his sort of photo team, and so that just kind of turned into more as a fun thing into actual publishing projects. And I do that as a volunteer because I don't see myself as a professional photographer. So I just say, hey, I'm just going to be there to help be part of this. So that's what I do. Um, and then the next benefit is it also helped develop relationship with colleagues, some of the heroes that I look up to. I see here on many people on this forum as well, like Michael Bashkin, Greenfield, Chris Jenkins, and many others, as well as musicians and different media publishers as well. Because I think it's just great to make friendship because you will actually see them and on a long term friendship. And oftentimes, we could sort of share a lot of the feedbacks and informations and like some of these relationships that I've built have been building up early on through now. I mean, sometimes we talk about sandpapers, finish work. I mean, that's actually one of the main conversations we always end up in. But we, often than not, we talk about life, family, how to sort of be, not burn out and have more consistent workflow, um, and then market flow and things like that. So um, that's another benefits that I see. Um, Also, I find guitar shows to be the most effective approach to showcasing my work. There are many platforms nowadays, online platforms, by showing photos, sound clips, uh, videos, and while they're fantastic way to showcase the work, it- I find that guitars, because it's an instrument that a player needs to hold in their hands and play, and you really hear what it sounds like to my ear, and also how it feels to me, how it resonates to me as a player. So I find that to be the most uh, sort of the real way to showcase my work on top of the all the other um, sort of way to show. And this is also because when people come visit me at the shop, they usually won't get to see a guitar completed. Usually they're in parts, they're in different stages of guitar making, and they're not fully completed. But when I come to shows, I come fully prepared, making sure everything is uh, as close to be completed under my eyes before the show. And so they would actually see my best work at the time at the show. So that's why I like to going to shows and just have people hold it, even though uh, I'm not able to take orders right now. I just still go there and show that people could hear and feel it. And that leads into a personal interaction with potential clients. And you know it's best to sort of meet them in person, what they are like, how the playing style is, and just one conversation leads to another, and often you stay in touch. And even if it's not immediate um, sort of follow up, it usually ends up being uh, a long-term clients. And I've had many cases where they've and I have been, the clients and I have potential clients and I have been in touch, and they say, hey, I'm actually finally ready to pull the trigger, and I like to uh, sign up with your waiting list and commission a guitar from you. So I've had many instances where I was able to sort of follow up through that. And it also, and I was talking with Michael Greenfield about this, about shows, and part of the things that he told me that really stuck to me is that by coming to show, you are also reinforcing the value of the name of your name or the brand, uh, because then you're really putting yourself out and to the real world that you're serious about this. You're investing money, time, and energy into doing shows to show that you're a solid brand, and it generally and usually helps with the resale value and the brand of your instruments for the current clients uh, and the future clients. So they will see that you're always present. Uh, so there's some of those things too, and of course, what are some of the
Can
disadvantages?
Hold on. I got it.
just wanted to mix it in with the rest of the water.
Hold on. I got it. Oh, hey, Neil, can you mute? Oh, you got it.
think
Okay,
he's
go
muted. Yeah.
ahead.
Okay. So that's part of it, and of course, there's some challenges to doing shows, and that's not to be sort of overlooked as well, because first it costs money, a lot of money. Depends on what show you do, but I mean, even for me, even if I were to do a local show, which happens to be NAMM show, so that's a still very expensive show. So we're talking about the exhibition fee. On top of that, there's lodging, food, and most importantly, that I find to be the most costly is that the time away from the shop uh, before the show, leading up to the show, and after the show. Because typically, for some reason, I can't seem to come back the next day and zone right back into what I've been doing. I usually need to take a few days off to sort of find the rhythm in my shop. So that those are some of the things to consider, and also that also means that doing shows, you have to really figure out about your build schedule. If you don't have a lot of orders now, I think that's great, and that's fine to do the shows, because that actually gives you the boost and energy to really focus on. All right, I'm gonna get the guitar show guitars done, and boom, that's great. But oftentimes, as you get more into it, you're trying to deliver a guitar for clients, for your dealers, or if you have some other project that's been going. But at some point, usually 2 to 3 months leading up to the show, you kind of have to drop everything and then start focusing on the guitar uh, for the shows, so that you meet that hard deadline. And that could work to your advantage or disadvantage, but that gives you like a full focus. But sometimes things can happen, and most of the times, you're about a week away from the show, and everyone is just like on this like crazy show mode. I mean, it's just so. There are those things to consider: stress management, time management. So that's some of the things to consider, and also to consider what shows are there. I mean, that's also, what shows do I want to attend? And I think, that's something for you to think about, really look into it. Some of the established shows right now that I am aware of as of today is there's a NAMM show in California in January. There's an Artisan show that's great. That's in Pennsylvania in April. There's a LaConner show in Washington in May. There's a Frepper Summit that happens in Chicago in August. For Archtops, there's a Rocky Mountain Archtop Festival in September. And I think there are more shows coming up, but that I haven't personally attended, so I can't really speak to it. And that's for the domestic shows for the USA. And some of the international shows, there's a Mantra show in Switzerland in May. There's Sound Messe in Osaka in Japan, also in May. There's Guitar Summit, Germany. There's Cremona show in Italy. And I think there's a French show called Putux show in October. And there's a Music China also in Shanghai in October as well. So these are some of the shows for you to consider, and sort of, you could go into the website and see what they are like. And lastly, um, some of the tips that if I could provide, or if that I want to that I could share that I do, and this is something that my wife has pointed out that I typically do, um, that I thought were helpful, is that first you got to put on a smile, right? So it's hard because sometimes the shows are like 8 to 9 hours long, and you kind of go in there after working hundreds of hours, and you're tired. But typically, when I'm getting ready for the show in the morning, I just go out. I just do a lot of the sort of facial muscle exercise to get this break down my micro muscles on my face, and just give it a little bit of stretch. Do all of it. I mean, whatever it takes. I think smiling is a big part of the show, because we are there for guitars, and guitars is supposed to be there. This is not a stressful show. This is actually, we're there for music. We're there for guitars. We were there because we love doing it. So putting on a smile, I think it's a very important for me. Also dressing up for me, because I kind of want to show that I am serious about it. So it doesn't have to be a full suit, but I like to wear button-up shirts, making sure that I clean myself, groom myself, and that everything looks nice and clean, because that also shows the representation of my work. So I like to sort of do that myself. Another thing that I like to do, if possible, and it's very difficult a lot of times because it's a long day, but I like to usually stand up around my table instead of sitting down most of the time. And for me, that's sort of the way to kind of keep my energy going, so that when clients come, they're seeing me for the first time, and I want to show that I am there to engage. So I am there to give attention. So that's one of the things also that I do. The other thing that I do is, and this is kind of like my little secret tip, but I carry around this little Listerine, the mint strips with me, and this kind of helps me. I don't know if you can see it, yeah. And I just have like whole pack in my pocket, and usually just consume it. It sort of keeps my breath fresh, and I want to make sure that when I'm talking to somebody, that I don't smell like burgers or onions, or pizza that I just had. I want to make sure that I give a as good and cleanest presentation as possible. So yeah, it's just like one of those things that I do. And then most importantly, regardless of who shows up at the table, I like to make sure that I put the best, most attention to the the clients that are coming at the table. And lastly, and this is one of the most important things that Richard Hoover shared with me, because I asked, like, Richard, what's your secret to surviving a NAMM show? And he said, well, Isaac, the most important thing is when you're going to restroom, you don't make any eye contact. You look at the ground and you follow the path to the bathroom, and then people will know that you're busy, you're going somewhere. So you can look on the floor and then just walk into the bathroom, and then you can survive NAMM just fine. So that's my brief story that I wanted to share. If you have any questions, please let me know. And yeah, even if you come up with it later, you can always reach out to me.
Yeah, that was really cool.
All
Thank
right, Chris, what are your thoughts on guitar shows and tips and tricks? And I will say that Chris has one of the best table presentations I've seen in terms of lighting, and I might not be remembering this correctly, but even having a stand that rotates. Is that correct, Chris?
Well, I mean, none of that's original, just over the years, I stole that from various people. But Isaac did a really good job of talking about important things about guitar shows. But I think there's sort of a blessing and a curse. It's a requirement to do some. And they're very expensive. There's really good things about them. Every once in a while, somebody might sell, we might sell a guitar, or we don't count on that anymore. In the beginning, it seems like guitars were sold a lot more, but not so much anymore. So I don't think people should go into a show planning on selling a guitar. I think they should just look at it as a form of advertising and meeting the public, like Isaac said, letting them play their instruments, see what they do in person. I think that's a really good way to look at it. But it is important to make a good presentation. And we try to dress up the table a little bit, put a nicer cloth on it. And one time when we went to Berlin, when that show was going on, which was a great show, we got there and, there were a few Americans there, 3 or 4 or 5. And the only people that didn't light their instruments were the Americans, and all the Europeans had these great LED lights on their instruments, and the hall was kind of dark, and their instruments looked so great, and ours looked like crap. You couldn't see them. And so, we picked up on that and came back to the Woodstock show and had lights on our instruments, and everybody said, wow, what are you doing with those lights? Where'd you get that? So it's easy to do. They're just little clip-on lights you get on Amazon, LED, battery powered. The batteries last a long, long time, but it makes a big difference. People can see your instruments. A lot of halls aren't lit well at all. And a big part of going to shows is talking with other luthiers, picking up tips, and like Isaac said, seeing the work. And I've said guitar shows are a blessing and a curse, and that's how I feel most of the time when I'm inspired seeing all the work there, and at the same time I'm bummed out because it's so good, and I think that's so much better than our work. But you have to you better take your A game to the show, and if you do that, you'll be all right. I remember Isaac's first show, and I remember how successful he was, and I don't remember him having anything special at his table, no special cloth or lights or anything. He just had really good guitars, and that's the main thing. You better have really good guitars, and if you do that, you're gonna do really well. And that's the way that Memphis show for most people was a disaster. There were about twice as many luthiers there as there were attendees, but Isaac had a great show because he had great guitars there, and he was giving people the opportunity to see them for the first time. So number one, make sure your work is really good, and if you want to try to present it, make it stand out a little bit with a good presentation, I think that's important. And I think it's important to get out and talk. Get out of don't sit back there behind and wait for somebody to come around and tap you on the shoulder and ask you to let them play your guitar. Greet them. I think sometimes, Texans are friendly people, and maybe for some people too friendly. And maybe we scare people off sometimes, but I think it's important we can try to greet everybody and tell them they're welcome to try the instruments. And then when they pull out their metal thumb picks, we say, well, maybe not, maybe not you, but try to engage them, talk with them. And we've made some of the best friends we have in the world or other luthiers that we met. My first, engagement with Michael Bashkin, who's, I dare say, one of my best friends. For sure, my best luthier friend is, he came up at my very first guitar show was Healdsburg, which was Baptism by Fire. And Michael walked up and said, Harry Fleischman, who just passed away, Harry, rest in peace, said for me to come up and meet you, and I'll help you out here at your table. And Michael and I have been good friends ever since. And, so guitar shows are great to get to see friends and make new ones, and not only the luthiers, but some of the customers, and players, the same way, players that use for demos or you just meet. They're fun things in a lot of ways, but they're very expensive. So we certainly can't afford to go to all of them, and we have to pick and choose. Try to go to different parts of the country and different ones and exposed to different markets. There's some places we seem to do better. We always did better in California than we did on the East Coast. And So we've not been to the artisan show since the first one, but I think we're going to go back this year. That type of thing, we do pretty well in Texas and the Midwest, but I think the basic things that Isaac said are great advice. You have to do a good presentation. You have to be willing to engage with people. You have to bring your best product. The lights are a little tip that's nice to do. It was at Woodstock one year. The name slips my mind. Who's the very inventive Swiss couple?
Pagelli?
Yeah, Pagelli. They had a cake display that rotated with a guitar stand attached to it, they had two of them showing their guitars. And I went up and asked him where he got them, and he said, Amazon. And in a minute, he came over to me and he said, these are 120. We bought them just for this show. I'm not going to be able to use them back in Switzerland. He said, if you want to buy them after the show, I'm perfectly willing to sell them to you cheap. And I said, great, and so we bought them, and we still got them and use them. We have something that's one way to cut down the expense of the show we found is to share a table with a buddy. And we found a Hercules triple stand that's very, very sturdy, locks the guitars in at the nut. They can't fall off of it. And we can zip tie that Hercules stand in the center to that cake stand and have it rotate and really display well 3 guitars at once on a 2-foot or 3-foot space on half a table, which is really difficult to do just using traditional guitar stands. The wooden high-end guitar stands, I don't know if you can see one. I've got a guitar back here on one. They look really nice, but they're heavy and they're big. You can disassemble them and transport them, but I've programmed one of those into vectors for the CNC that breaks apart in the middle, and got a spline in it and a hinge, so you can take the long thing apart and it'll all fit the suitcase. And if we just have one guitar or two, I think we're going to start carrying a couple of those because those look very nice. And I don't know how to do it really. I've got a couple of things I'd like to put up for the Luth group. That and the LMI joining jig, since they're no longer in business. Yeah, Michael's got one of those stands right there. Maybe we can see better. People want to make them. They're pretty simple. Put the vectors up on for the Luth group. So I don't know how much more I can add to what Isaac had to say, because this was all very good advice. You got to be friendly. You got to be willing to work at it. It's a job. You don't want, because it is expensive to travel. For us, there's no close guitar shows. There was a small one at New Braunfels, but it's very small. There's only 9 luthiers a year, and we haven't been to every one of them. And it's a successful show as far as selling instruments, but certainly don't go there every year. So that's the only one we've ever been to that we could drive to. Actually, we did drive to Memphis, but that's no more. So we have airline tickets, we have hotels, we have the fees for the show, we have meals. So it's very expensive, and you need to make the most of it. Need to work at it. It's sort of exhausting, as everybody that's been to one knows. So it's they can be, they're great in a lot of ways and they're not fun at all in other ways. Blessing and a curse. So I guess other than questions, maybe at the end, that's probably all I can add to what Isaac said. Thought he did a real good job of summing it up.
All right. Well, thanks, Chris. I just wanted to follow up on the stand idea. This is a
Oh, you've done the same thing.
yeah. You beat me to it. So this was my take a stand. These were pretty expensive. It might have been about 200 or
A lot of,
$300.
I think you can get very, very plain one for around 200 and they go up.
So these were great, but they were very hard to travel with. So I cut this in half, and then I put a spline in here, which aligns it. And then I use these capture bolts to bolt a piece of, I believe it's Brazilian rosewood. No, I'm just kidding. Some kind of probably walnut just together. And so this whole thing breaks down. This bottom comes off. It's friction fit, and I can put it on my. Usually fit it in luggage, or certainly if I'm shipping a guitar to a show, which I'll get to in a minute. You can easily fit it in the box along with the guitar. So it's kind of cumbersome to deal with a stand like this, but the fact that it lifts the guitar off the table and holds it horizontally without tipping it back, I feel like presents the guitar better. As Chris mentioned, some of the lighting at the shows is just terrible, and the lighting can be quite harsh, and other spots can be very dark. But when the guitar is tipped back like this, often the lighting from the ceiling hits it at just the worst angle for the peg head, and seeing even a finely rubbed out lacquer finish. It's almost like you're looking at it underneath a halogen light. So I do prefer these stands. I do have some information to add to what Chris and Isaac already said. And Ian, can I share a screen?
Yes, you should.
Okay.
You should be able to.
All right. All right. Can people please tell me if they see an Excel spreadsheet? You don't see
No.
the.
No.
Oh, it says my screen sharing is paused.
Try.
Oh,
That's
to
on
try
your.
it again.
Yeah, go ahead and stop it, and then. Oh wait, hold on a second.
Okay.
What's going on here? Okay, give it a whirl.
All right. It still says it's paused.
Are you on a Mac?
No, I'm on a PC.
I'll just check the settings.
Oh wait, resume share.
Sure. Sounds good.
Keeps pausing me.
Huh. Do you want to?
We'll click the enter full screen mode. Is that
Yeah, it says that on the thing. Oh, that's on our end. So, do you want to email it to me really quick and I'll share it?
Sure.
Okay. While we're waiting for the email, Chris, can you speak? You talked a little bit about people with metal thumb picks. Can you talk, unless Michael, you got this coming up, like instrument safety in the rough and tumble world of narrow aisles and greasy mittens?
well, it's just
You ever had to get?
we've had some instruments damaged at shows, not badly, but usually pick marks, and obviously a metal thumb pick is more likely to scratch a finish than a plastic one. But we probably never had anything happen that we couldn't, rub out or polish, sand and polish out when we got home. But it's just, it just it just seems like it's too much of a chance when they some guys have picked them up and really it goes all over me when every once in a while somebody will just walk up and grab an instrument and start playing it without saying anything. Most people are really nice and considerate at a show. They'll ask, or you'll offer, and then they'll do it. But there's guys that'll just beat the hell out of it, and people who are good players, of course, they're gonna play it in a respectful way. But people will walk up and leather vests with spikes on it. Most people, if they have any sense, when they come to a guitar show, they're wearing a soft T-shirt or a shirt with no buttons on, something where they know they're not going to damage an instrument. If they go out of their way to be sure they're not going to damage anything when they play it. And if they're wearing something where I think they might damage it, I'll say something to them and ask them to be really careful. I don't think that's out of line. And most of them don't mind at all. They understand.
Yeah. I would look
All
at
right.
Michael.
Okay, so this is just a little.
Hold on a second. Doug
Oh,
Proper, are you seeing this? Okay, continue.
Okay, so Isaac and Chris, as we're talking about the expenses, but really very few prices were given. So I wanted to actually attach some hard numbers to these things, and this would be a typical domestic show for me. So this was, say, very similar. I used these costs from the LeConner show I just did back in May. And in this case, I chose to drive. So I had rental car and gas, but flights probably would have been similar. Maybe a little bit cheaper. I had 2 nights of hotel on the road, so I put that into the travel expense to get there. Um, but you can see you got table fees. Often you're shipping guitars, um, which I'll talk a little bit more about. Airbnb, hotel, meals, miscellaneous, and then if you want to do a mini concert, seems like the going rate for those is about $250 to the player for a 20-minute concert. Um, and these are probably on the cheap side. But so let's just say roughly, $3,000 out of pocket to do a domestic guitar show here in the U.S. If it's international, then it's quite a bit higher, especially on the travel end, and depending on where it is, perhaps in the hotels. So this is I'd say definitely you want to budget about $3,000 for a 3-day show, and then the something that Isaac mentioned that is hard to put a number on is the time out of the shop. And so you figured 3-day show, minimum 5 days out of the shop or away from home. 2 days, 1 day of travel on each side, and that also really has a cost associated with it. Do you have orders that you are behind on, or other work that you're putting off to get to the show? So these are all trade-offs that you need to think about. And but it falls into this idea of kind of missed opportunity cost of, if you have that $3,000 you put into the show, and you're expecting a return on investment um, of a certain amount, are you better off taking that $3,000 doing something else with it? maybe it's doing like Ameritrade day trading, or putting the money into your website. Um, there's a variety of things, but it's a good exercise for yourself to look at these shows in that sense. And it's not just one show, but I would say it's a series of shows, over the years, to ask yourself if they're worth it to you. How many shows do you really need to do a year? Um, I think once you're established, you probably don't need to do that many shows a year, maybe, one or two a year. And it's good to take advantage of going to different geographic areas out of the country if you can, because as Isaac mentioned, to have the opportunity to put your guitar in the hands of a potential customer is really what it's all about. So that's kind of putting some hard numbers on what we've
Michael,
been
can I ask you a
talking.
question?
Yeah, sure.
Like, maybe this seems too abstract to even think about putting a number on, but like, do you have a sense of like where your career would be at without guitar shows? I know it's kind of impossible to say, but would you say that where you're at would have been in your career would be impossible to get to without guitar shows? Or
Not
I don't
impossible.
know.
Yeah, not impossible, but the path I think would have been different and potentially harder.
Yeah.
Um, there were times where, I'd go to a guitar show, or maybe it was even, for example, the GAL convention where I exhibited, and the whole thing could be a bust. And I've had shows that were pretty lame, but you just meet, one person or one dealer, and then that can open up, you know, avenues for sales and guitars down the
Mhm.
road. And so, in retrospect, looking back on doing 20 plus years of shows, I feel like, yeah, it's been worth it, because it has allowed me to make the connections with customers, with dealers, and also with suppliers as well. Because often at these shows, there are wood dealers, there's case vendors. If I don't build electrics, but often there's hardware vendors. Um, so that's another reason why I found it useful to go to the NAM show, even though I don't always exhibit. I go there to kind of see what's out there in the world for me to build with.
Is
So
is that, do you think, kind of as the internet has progressed, is that argument getting harder to make for making connections through that? Or is that still like the face-to-face aspect of it is still important?
yeah, I think it's getting harder to make, but I do think the face-to-face aspect, at least for me, is still important,
Uh,
because you
do
just
you,
kind of never know, who's going to walk by your table in the last hour of the show, and maybe you strike up a conversation. It's always kind of seemed to have
do you agree
ultimately
with
been worthwhile, even though it's not worthwhile on the spot, and nothing may happen at that show or the next month or even the next year. It's just kind of like building up this, beating the inertia of all of those connections and communications in person. So, and I think there is a certain aspect, like Isaac said, about being able to put somebody guitar in their hands for 30 seconds will tell them more information about the guitar and about your building than a picture or a video or recording ever could. So yeah, I'm an advocate for that. Now, to get into some of the reasons to not do a guitar show, is that there are builders who are very well established. They have great name recognition, and the shows are just they don't need them for sales. You know, that's what it comes down to. They have a solid order book. Um, maybe they have dealers that are constantly, they're just saying, you know, well, whatever you have, just send me. Um, and so the shows are kind of an unnecessary expense. They don't feel like they need to be there to support the brand, because the brand is already well established. Um, so, you know, I think that does apply to certain builders. I don't feel like it applies to me. Um, but that is one way of looking at it. And another way of looking at it is, a while ago I was talking to Rick Turner, um, and he said, you know, well, you go to a show and you sell a guitar. This, you know, great. This is, you know, you and people seem to be really happy to go to a show and sell a guitar and to break even. Um, and he said to him, you know, breaking even is another way of saying I could have just stayed at home. Um, and in a lot of respects, you know, I agree with him in a dollar and cents, um, you know, way to look at it. Uh, but I think the opportunity that the guitar shows can give you, or they have the potential to give you, is, as Isaac and Chris mentioned, it's this idea of planting seeds, of meeting people face to face, of being able to show them your work in a way that they will, you know, not get to see through a dealer, or a video, or just pictures. So it's, you have to think about it in the long term. Now, I think I don't have any sales numbers to back this up, but you know, my estimate from a guitar show is that somewhere between 5 and say, you know, 8% of the guitars at a show will actually get sold, or orders placed.
Like of
And
all the vendors there,
yeah, and
5 or 8%.
you know, if there's 50 um, exhibitors at a show and they each have 3 guitars, you know, 150 guitars, you're talking probably around, you know, 10 or so guitars getting sold out of the entire show. And so, you know, the fact is that the chances are against you to actually sell a guitar off your table. And then the higher price range you're in, those numbers go down more. Um, in my opinion, it's easier to sell a guitar, you know, at a show off a table for somebody to kind of make a snap decision like that if the guitar is more in the lower price range, as opposed to, you know, making a large, you know, luxury level purchase on the spot. Um, so it was a while ago that I actually viewed going to guitar shows as with having no expectations of selling a guitar. I actually found that to be counterproductive, for me, because not only was I setting myself up for disappointment, you know, the numbers are just, it's a hard nut to crack, you know, based on those numbers. So what I, you know, do now is, most of the time when I go to shows, I actually don't have a guitar for sale on the table. Um, I usually have a guitar that I've recently finished. I've discussed it with the customer, or the dealer that I'm going to, you know, take this guitar to the show, and it's essentially a sample. You know, it's an example of my work, but it's not for sale. So that's kind of how I've approached it. It definitely has taken a ton of pressure, for me going to a guitar show. Is say, well, I don't have anything to sell, and so you know, I'm more relaxed. I'm not trying to sell anything, you know, off the table. So I I don't feel like I have to, um, you know, kind of enter that salesperson mode, when it discussing prices or, you know, or anything like that. And Now that's not certainly not going to apply to everybody. Especially newer guitar makers getting into exhibiting at shows are probably going to have guitars for sale. Um, and my advice to you would be, you know, you can sell a guitar, and if you do, great, but just don't have the expectation like I need to go there to sell a guitar to pay for the show because I put the whole thing on my credit card, or I need the money or something like that.
That's gambling.
Yeah, that's gambling. There is one show in my entire career so far where I was desperate to sell a guitar. The fact is, I needed the money, and I had a guitar for sale. And this guy could just smell desperation on me.
There's
It's just like I sprayed it on like a cologne.
Let's be honest, there's a lot of desperation at those guitar shows.
Yeah.
I feel.
And so of course, he waited till the show was Friday, Saturday, Sunday. He waited till Sunday at 4:45. Show was ending at 5 to come up and make me an offer, and I accepted it, and pretty much I've always regretted that sale.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's my
I
some of the thinking about how I approach guitar shows. There are definitely other things that
Can I sneak another question in really quick?
yeah, of course.
So you just got done doing, or not just got done doing, but you did the Japanese show this
Yeah.
year. And
Uh-huh.
for me, it brings up like selection of which shows to like invest your time and money in. And you said that the international shows are much more expensive. Was that your first time going to Japan for a show?
To Japan, yes.
But not abroad. You've paid international airfare before. How do you like? What is it that you're looking for in that says that this show's a good fit for you and for representing your brand there?
Yeah, good question. A lot of it has to do with the size of the show and how established the show is. If it's a high dollar show, uh, in terms of the expenses, I'm going to be more reticent to lay out money, say for a first year show. But if I hear from other builders like, oh yeah, I know it's not around anymore, but for example, the Holy Grail show in Berlin, oh yeah, it's a good show. It's well run, which is really nice to hear because not all shows have been well run. And that they have people, they have foot traffic coming through the door. You don't want to travel 5,000 miles, just to talk to the person who has the table next to you for 3 days straight. So, um, and so those are kind of some of the things I want a well-established show that I've heard good things about, and that it's in a geographic area where I, I may not have too many guitars. Like in Japan, I have a dealer, and so they want guitars, and in that case, again, like I've been mentioning, the guitar that I bought with me was already purchased by the dealer, so I wasn't going there um, knowing that I was going to be coming home with a guitar. So that made the whole decision to do it a lot easier. And it's, essentially it goes into the marketing budget, um, and that's kind of how I view it. Now, there is another view where you say, well, if you took that $3,000 to $5,000, why not spend it on for your own direct marketing? In other words, make you know improve your website, make some videos, do some um, I don't know, maybe fly a client in or something like that. There are
Or
other ways.
what about
Uh-huh.
sending your guitar to Dream Guitars, or just sucking it up and paying the 40% or whatever
Yeah.
like somebody else?
Um, that's, to me, that's a different topic.
Okay.
Um, yeah, the whole dealer builder relationship, which is, constantly in flux. So, um, but it's kind of about, in a way, it's like, can you use that money to be your own dealer and have your own
Yeah.
kind of marketing guitar show? And I know a few builders who have, thought to take that approach. Like, yeah, this is now worth it. I can spend the money more effectively in other ways to promote sales. So,
Doug Proper has his hand up.
oh yes, Doug.
Just a quick question that I'd like to have just an opinion or to both have you and Chris opine about. Both of you have a lot of experience doing guitar shows. My only experience at guitar shows was, we used to do a ton of them. I used to do a ton of them as a player, and in recent years, I only do them as a social event. But for younger builders out there, it's something that occurred to me while I was listening to you speak. And both you and Chris have obviously had a lot of experience doing these shows, and you both bring up the notion that as time goes on, you become more judicious about the shows you're going to do, or you pick and choose where your time and your money is best spent. For a younger builder who's just getting into doing guitar shows, or looking to make a name for themselves and those kind of things, obviously guitar shows are a big part of it. But seems to me, at least from a financial standpoint, there seems to be an upside down world that exists, because the importance of doing more shows to create a name for yourself falls on the budget's least able to handle them, because they are expensive to do. And as time goes on, you can afford to do more because you establish yourself more, but you don't necessarily need to do them. At the beginning, when you really can't afford to do them because your guitars are not commanding the same kind of money, is when you need to do more of them. And therefore, each show is a larger and larger percentage of your product being showcased. You understand where I'm coming from? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense, and I agree with you. Um, I That's just the way it is. There, it may seem unfair, unkind to the younger, newer builder, uh, but it's really just about, I think, investing in your future, and biting the bullet. And it's not, doing these shows. It's not black and white in terms of, if you do this, then this will happen. There is a risk. There is a gamble, and finances are certainly part of it. Um, and it is harder on, the builders who are newer, but at the same time, as I mentioned earlier, if of the guitars that sell at guitar shows, more, I think, are in the lower price range. So, Chris, do you have anything to add to that?
No, not really. About the international guitar shows, we we have done. We went to Osaka this past year. Jeremy did, and it was primarily to try to make contact with a dealer over there, because we didn't have one, and it was successful, and that was great. But in general, the international guitar shows, look at them as a nice, the European ones especially, and that's the ones we've mainly been to, Berlin and Italy, uh, a European vacation that Uncle Sam will help pay for a little bit. Uh, I don't I don't know that we'll ever sell a guitar in Italy, uh, but I'll go to every guitar show I can there. Probably such a wonderful place and wonderful people, and and wonderful friends there. Uh, Best top wood in the world, that kind of thing. But it's you know, so there's lots of reasons for going abroad to guitar shows other than selling. And I think it does add to the brand too, I think it's added a lot to our brand going over there. But um, the they're good to do. They're real expensive to do, but I think looking at it like as a vacation that you're going to get to deduct the expense from your taxes is a good thing.
Yeah, it definitely helps soften the blow, and almost all of the guitar shows that are in a nice location, I'll try and spend an extra.
Yeah,
Some
Ramona's
extra,
fantastic.
extra. So, okay, I wanted to mention some of the uh, kind of planning for the unexpected in terms of, oh, you are shipping guitars to a guitar show rather than traveling with them, and you know, I can't think of a guitar show that I've been to where there's somebody, a builder at a table, and there's no guitars there, and say, well, what's going on? Oh, well, United or American has my guitars, but they don't know where they are. So uh, if you are traveling, um, and flying with the guitar has its risks. Shipping the guitar has its risks. You can certainly get damage either way. Um, I, I agree with everything that I don't really have anything to add to what Chris and Isaac said about in terms of damage. It does happen, but there's a little bit of a kind of looking at kind of trying to assess the person, and the dress is often very important. Do they have, they're wearing a metal jacket with metal buttons on it and a zipper, um, and I'd definitely ask them to, can they please take the jacket off, and you know same thing with belt buckles, um, and those are all important things, but also just even how you hand the guitar to the person. You need to present this as a highly valued, precious, and fragile object. And so I will be the one to take it off the stand and hand it to them with two hands, or carry it with them to a listening room, or playing room. So that those things help, uh, but there are risks for doing that for sure. Um, I would say that the there's, and this is a bit ironic, but a guitar show can be a terrible place to buy a guitar, because especially acoustic guitars, because it's often noisy, it's chaotic, it's crowded, um, and you can't hear shit at the table. And most guitar shows have some insulated for sound playing rooms, um, but you can't always get in them, and people's time is precious. Maybe they want to play the guitar, and the listening rooms are full, and so they're be like, oh, I'll just sit in the stairwell, or so it's good when you go to a guitar show to kind of scope out where are alternative spots, and they're always there. There's usually um, some hallways, or just areas that there's some chairs, and so you could take advantage of it that way. So um, and then some other points I just wanted to add. I'm not gonna try not to repeat anything that Chris and Isaac said, but in terms of the table, some other things that kind of help people come to your table is you can put out a little bowl of candies, um, and or guitar picks, or something that they can come over and grab, and maybe initiate a conversation. I do think it's important to stand and to stand out in front of your table as much as you can. It it's much easier to catch somebody's eye and initiate a conversation doing it that way as opposed to sitting behind your table and just looking at your phone and waiting for somebody to ask for your attention. So, Max, do you have your hand up? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Hi. So many questions,
Okay.
but yeah, no, regarding, I guess it's different because, for me, the international shows are, your domestic shows, so it's like the other way around. And when traveling internationally to a show, the whole issue of just the logistics, as you said, ship the guitars and stuff, but then when you're actually then going through borders or customs or temporary import and stuff like that, it all starts to get very messy very quickly. And so I don't know if, like, people who've done it internationally more often, what tips, um, what's your experience about it, and, like, what to do, the do's and don'ts. And
Yeah.
we've all been at shows where, like, so and so, oh, he was stopped at the border, he had to turn around because he didn't have his paperwork, or stuff like that, or damaged guitars and stuff like that. So especially on international travel, what
Yeah.
how
Got a
you go.
pretty strong
Absolutely.
opinion on that and quite a bit of experience. And my experience is if you want to always get your guitar to the show, and this has never failed for me, you attempt to carry it on the plane. And that won't always work, but at least, you attempt to carry it and put it in the overhead. That's what I mean. Now, that won't always work, but it will always get on the plane with you. And I've never been asked for any paperwork, never been asked anything about the guitar. I've been threatened to be thrown off many a flight because I argued with them about carrying it on or not. But it's my experience, if you give them a little bit of an argument, they actually take better care of it, and they, kind of see to it that if they don't let you carry it on. Many of, you never know. It just depends on who you're dealing with. Some of them go out of their way to let you carry it on, and some of them are dead set against it. Like I say, and they'll threaten to throw you off the flight when you argue with them. But the only catch to that is you have to have a very good case to be sure that your guitar is not going to be damaged when it goes into with the luggage. And it's lately, it's my experience in this economy that people are more and more price sensitive, and not everybody wants to pay for a Carlton case these days. Back, 6 or 8 years ago, it didn't seem to be a factor, but now it is. They just soon get it with a gig bag and pay $1,500 less, But
Well, Carlton went through the roof, didn't they? I heard their prices got crazy.
But, but we keep a couple around that we travel with, and maybe carry a gig bag just in case we sell a guitar. Somebody doesn't want it, and they and I feel confident carrying the guitars anywhere in that. I had one get away from me trying to carry too much luggage at once. And if you've ever been on the escalators in the London subway, you know that they're like 4 or 5 stories tall. And I had one go end over end down the subway, escalator, and get almost to the bottom before somebody stopped it. It was late at night, like 2 a.m. and totally undamaged. Now, so that's the one caveat to, if you're going to be forced to check it a lot of the time, but it'll always get on that same plane with you and it'll arrive with you. And shipping, you can't be sure it's going to get there. And if you ship, then you may have, like Max says, you may have problems with tight papers and this and that. But carrying it, I've smuggled Brazilian rosewood guitars into England and never been questioned. It just, if you're carrying it, it's just your guitar.
Until you do. It's never happened until it does.
Yeah.
I mean, but those airline officials don't know and don't care. They care whether you're going to put it in the cabin, and that's about it.
Yeah. You could also, I mean, in a pinch, you could buy a seat for your guitar too, couldn't you? Like,
Well, you could do that, but I'm too cheap for that.
okay. Hey, Michael, I wanted to ask you one question about one thing I noticed at Artisan was the broad array of branding going on the tables. You had people from very, all I got's a tablecloth and the guitars to very elaborate, like, CNC'd signs with their logos and stuff, and they were wearing shoelaces with their name on them and stuff. Like, do you think there's like how would you imagine is there an average guitar consumer and how they would respond to that? Is there ever a point where you're like, that's too much? Or I don't know, do you go with like the Isaac thing of just showing up in a suit, or do you wear a Bashkin Guitars t-shirt to let everybody know that you're Michael Bashkin? Or
Yeah.
what's the
Yeah, I don't. It's just my comfort level.
uh,
I understand the idea of the branding and all the visual continuity and signatures, and you have it, on a button-down shirt, the name on the chest, and there's signs, and but it's just a personal thing. Maybe I'm leaving money on the table or being naive or stupid about it, but I just feel
let's
like
just say
it's,
it, you're a hippie. Everybody knows you're a
yeah,
hippie, Michael.
just a little too much for me. I mean, there are some other, like tips, for example, or tricks. I don't know if I call it a trick, but like I have seen some builders, they will have bags printed with their name on it, their guitars. And it's just like a little canvas carry bag or some kind of nylon bag. And when people go to shows, they want to, they pick up business cards and literature and, whatever, and they need something to carry it in. And so, well, hey, this person has bags, you know, and the trick is that, it brings them to your table, and they have to ask you for a bag,
Mhm.
and that initiates a conversation, and maybe it initiates them to, for them to play your guitar, because they're not they're not there, or nobody's going to have time to play every single guitar in the room. That's And so, there are ways to kind of make your guitars uh, to increase your chances of taking somebody's time to do that. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
iPhone 46 has a question.
Okay.
Mr. 46. Let's see.
Sorry, I was trying to get my phone unmuted there.
Okay.
My name is Gage Halland. I build guitars in Montana. And I had a thought about what Michael was saying about how you present yourself at the shows. And it was something that I noticed after doing La Conner and Artisan and a couple other shows in a row, that how you present yourself seems to set the tone for what that client interaction is going to be like as you move through an order. And my mentor took it very seriously, and presented himself the same way every time. But after doing these shows, I realized that being a little more casual makes the conversations a little more casual as you go on. And I realized that my interactions became more positive when I presented myself the same way I would anywhere else if I had run into them on the street. That's just my 2 cents on it. I used to stress out about how, was I dressed well enough or whatever. And I realized none of that was really me. And so the clients would be shocked when that changed drastically after the show.
That's a good point.
Yeah. Hey, Gage. Nice to hear from you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Sure. Yeah, I think you can't pretend to, well, you can pretend to be somebody else at the show, but it's probably ultimately gonna backfire on you. And often people are there, especially in the custom bespoke guitar world. It's not just about the guitar, but it's about the relationship between the builder and the client. And they want to have a good, comfortable relationship, and vice versa. So it is important to present yourself as you would like to see the order move forward.
Well, I think that one of the things that I think we've all had customer and client interactions where you kind of wish it would end quickly.
Mhm.
You want it to be over as soon as possible. And those ones where I develop a friendship, I have, repeat buyers based more on the friendship that we have built over the course of the first interaction. So it's just kind of changed the way I put myself out there, I guess, a little bit. And I guess my thing is I don't want to act like I'm doing them a favor being at the show. Like, oh, I will allow you to touch my guitars. It's like, no, it's an industry show. It's the same way as any other industry show. I think you're putting your wares out there. You can't be too picky on who's touching them.
Mhm. Yeah, it's true. It's a good point, and I have mentioned this to other people when talking about shows that I when somebody comes to my table, whether it's a kid or somebody maybe who doesn't look like they're in the market or my conception of what my customer demographic should be, um, I really make a strong effort to throw that out the window and fight any of those urges that I have to maybe stereotype or anything about that. Because hey, maybe that 12-year-old kid is the next Tommy Emmanuel. Maybe he won't have the money or the interest this year, but maybe his dad's a successful dentist. You just never know. So keep an open mind about it, and treat everybody like their customer. And for some people, the that amount of personal interaction, 8 or 9 hours for 3 days, is uncomfortable. But um, as much as you can, you have to kind of put your your show face on. It's work in that sense. So
Are you exhausted at the end of a show? Like,
yeah, usually at the shows there's concerts every night, and I I'm not sure I've been to a single one. Um, it's not that I don't love the music; it's just that I want to go, have dinner and relax
I'll lay down.
and just be somewhere less crowded. So yeah,
I have a question.
yeah, Jeff.
Well, Michael and others that have done shows, in the unlikely event that you do get a buyer for a guitar, is there a preferred method of payment that people like over another? PayPal, I have, an account with, but they'll take like almost 4%. Somebody suggested Zelle and somebody else suggested Venmo. Any feedback on any of those from anybody?
Um, I've kind of used all of them, including cash, which was a little weird. But,
Yeah.
and sometimes when I have sold a guitar at a show, I will just take a deposit. And so I don't mind, say, the PayPal fee on $1,000. And
Right.
I discuss, okay, I want to take the guitar back to my shop,
And get it up. Right.
clean it
Yeah.
up, new strings, all this stuff. And then, we can deal with the transaction through a money wire or a check. So Jeff, before I forget, that brings up a good point, which is, there's something also potentially unexpected at shows, which is that, the setup that you have on the guitar can really sometimes go to shit at a show.
Yep. Yeah.
Because, the humidity may be,
Environment. Yep.
really unfriendly. So I now will typically set up my guitars lower than I would, leaving the shop in humidity controlled environment, just because I feel like all the people in a room, exhaling raises the humidity, and the top on my guitars is going to rise a little bit, and the action's going to get a little
That's-
higher. And
Okay.
I bring a truss rod wrench with me. I haven't had Nex back bow, but maybe I've wanted to tweak them a little bit. Some builders I know will change strings after each day of the show. I don't do that, but if you feel that that's what best represents your guitars, then that's a good idea to do. And all right, Max, you have a question?
Thanks. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, hi, Gage. Hi, Jeff. So these are lifesavers. The static big guard things that you can just put on and take off. I always forget them. And I always regret not bringing them. But for shows, when you have, all sorts of people, especially for the picking hand, everything else, what was said before. And the string changing also, at shows, with uncoated strings, once you have like 3 different people trying the guitar, the different chemistry, just at the end of the first day, the strings are done. So I don't like the way it sounds, because I think it takes away a bit. But for shows, I generally have coated strings on. If I don't feel like changing them every day. And then the other thing, considering all the expenses and all the things that were said before, and I subscribe to all of them. But if you do make the effort to do the show, and especially if it's like I generally do one show in the States, and I do the Cremona show, but that is basically sort of free for me or close to, and then maybe another show in Italy. And then if there's something in Europe that's worthwhile, but it is worth not doing a show once. So if you can come back to a place, maybe not every year, but alternate. Because I've had it happen to me. It happened this year at Harrisburg, where I was last in 2019. A guy remembered the instruments I had back then, and when somebody told him, "Oh, this is Max," he just like ran at the table. And so, it comes down to name recognition, which was said before. But yeah, don't plan to do like the one show and then never show up again, because it's most likely that if it's the first time you go, the chances you're selling are slim to begin with, and then then they're probably close to nothing. But the point I was making, if you do invest on going to a show, especially if it's like a big one and it's a big expense, I found it's absolutely game changing if you don't go by yourself. So if you can manage it, if you turn it into a vacation, go with your significant other, go with your kids, go with somebody. And because what happened to me all the time is that I'm at shows and then I'm just out and about because I go see other builders, I go see stuff, and then you're at the show and your table is, and you're not at the table for half of the time, and then if you are just staying at your table the whole time, you're missing out on all that networking that you can actually do. But if you're out and about doing the network and all of that, then your table, is unattended and things can happen, or people just don't stop if they don't see the builder at the table. And so that's it really is a game changer if you can manage to have somebody there coming with you. Sorry, it wasn't much of a question, it was more of a
No, those are all really good points. Thank you, Max. And often you do have to go to a show alone due to expenses or schedules, whatever. But I've had the experience where the person who you're either sharing a table with, you're next to, hey, I got to go to the bathroom. Can you wash my table? It's always never an issue. So there's usually
Yeah.
other exhibitors around who can help you out when you want to take a break. The last thing I want to mention, and then we'd open it up for questions if there's any more, is that, and this is just my own experience. Other people will probably have a very different perception of this. Is that there can be a little bit of a emotional dark side to shows because sometimes you can feel like you're standing against the wall at a high school dance and nobody's asking you to dance. And Ian knows what I'm talking about, right, Ian?
That's
And,
right.
Okay, but you'll see people. Often you're just watching because there's people walking around, nobody's coming by your table, and you'll see somebody go, play this guitar and that guitar and that guitar, and why aren't they coming to check out my guitar? And I don't have an answer. Maybe they heard something bad about your guitars. Maybe they're just not interested in the style of guitar that you make or building. They're just not your customer. And so don't, you know, I think it's just good to have the expectation that, yes, people are there to look at their, people are there to look at guitars, but they may just not be interested in your guitars. And that goes for dealers too. But I think, as Max said, repeatedly showing up at the same show, maybe not in consecutive years, but every other year, helps with that. Helps break that down. When people see you at the same show repeatedly, I think there's a greater chance of them actually having some interest in your instruments because, oh yeah, I never got to try them, last time, so maybe they'll make the effort this time. And then finally, I often come away from shows both inspired and intimidated, and to me, those are kind of two sides of the same coin. And I don't mind a bit of either. I like to get inspired by other people's guitars and see what they're doing, and the fantastic work. And as Isaac mentioned, it's also kind of a reality check of where your building is, relative to, say, some benchmark, which is the average at the show. And that the benchmark, what I've seen over the last 20 years is getting higher and higher and higher, and the craftsmanship um, of the guitars is just going up and up and up. So it's very important to only show your best work, and look at the shows as not only as a can make you, it's good for your business, but can also make you a better guitar builder. So with that, that's all I really have to say. But Chris and I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any more.
Do you have any questions?
I might add something on payment. My experience is just avoiding PayPal at all costs. Zeal is a great way to get paid because there's no fees for either person. A lot of people though want to use a credit card because they get, they have some backup with their credit card company, some kind of guarantee. And I would use almost any processor other than PayPal. They usually are less expensive. And I had the experience at show. I had two very expensive guitars that were sort of a set. And the guy wanted to buy them both. And he wanted to use PayPal so he could use his credit card. And when we started to make the transaction, PayPal told me they were going to hold the money for 6 weeks because it was a large transaction and we hadn't had any transactions on our account that big. And said, no, we're not going to do that, but I just think I've had nothing but bad experiences with them. So I would recommend using Square or any other. And Venmo is now owned by the same people that own PayPal. They're not charging fees yet, but they will. I'd get some legitimate credit card processor other than PayPal, or like I say, Zeal's great if your bank uses Zeal, but a lot of people want the guarantee that their credit card company gives them, or they feel like they have a guarantee. My experience is it's not as good as they claim, but it's just 2 cents worth on that subject.
Gage,
Yeah, I had a question for you guys that have been doing the shows longer than most of us. Have you noticed a change in the attendance? What I mean by that is like, it seems to me like there's a certain intimidation factor that has come up since the widespread use of social media to sell guitars. And I noticed that at a couple shows that there are people that are just genuinely intimidated to come up to some of these builders because there's this almost hero-like status that they've created in their mind after someone has great social media. And I have terrible social media, and I also am not the best in person either. So I'm curious, like, if you've noticed a difference in those people that are showing up to the shows versus pre-Instagram, YouTube, all of that, and if you've had to change your approach in interacting with those individuals.
For me, Gage, I have to say I haven't noticed a difference. Just been my experience. So
guitar players are guitar.
The only difference I've noticed is that, with the explosion of the internet is the explosion of, hobbyist luthiers, and somebody will come up that you think is interested in your guitars. And after you talk to them about 10 minutes, you realize they'll say, well, I'm a builder. They're just pumping you for information. Jeremy had a good suggestion that everybody at the show have some little red dots, adhesive dots at their table. And after you realize this about a guy, you put one of those on your hand and you slap him on the back. So he's walking around with a red dot on his back, and you know who those guys are, and you don't waste your time talking to them. I thought that was a good idea.
yeah, that does bring up a subject, Chris, which is that my personal experience is I have found a sizable proportion. I would say maybe half. If there are any other opinions on this, I'd like to know them. Of the people who go to guitar shows are people who build guitars, and I'm happy to talk to them, but I'm not happy to talk to them if I'm going to lose out talking to a potential customer. And so I try and assess like fairly quickly, oh, are you building guitars? And then if they, and they may say yes, and they may have questions, and we can have, a great interaction. But if I see other people coming up to my table and looking like they want to talk to me, and I'm talking to this person, then I will say, we can talk later. Excuse me. I want to talk to this person. Just make sure that, if they need something or if they have a quick question. And that's generally worked. But I also, that rule goes for myself because I do go and talk to other builders at a show. And the second somebody gets near their table, I'm out of there. Just say, I'll talk to you later, you know, because I don't want to take risk that opportunity for them. Oh, and there's one more little peeve I should mention that it doesn't happen often, but I think is kind of bad guitar show etiquette. If you are a builder and you're not exhibiting at a guitar show, but you bring guitars to the show, you're basically piggybacking off of everybody else's show fees and everything. And so I just think it's in poor taste to do that. And I haven't seen it too often, but I've definitely seen it, even to the extent where I was at a guitar show in Colorado, and show was inside a building, and a guy set up right out in the parking lot. He essentially set up his own guitar show with. So, anyhow,
Let me guess, was he building double neck guitars? That sounds like a double neck guitar move.
he might have had an acoustic double neck.
Yeah, that's
So good call, Ian. Yeah.
Yeah, that's bold. That happens at like vintage guitar shows too. Guys will walk around with a case with a price tag on it or something.
Yeah.
So does anybody marshal that? Like there must be people there.
I would assume it would be up to the show organizers,
Yeah.
the people running the show, So, and usually in the literature about the show, it would say, you certainly can't bring a guitar inside, inside the show.
It's like bringing your own popcorn to a movie.
Yeah.
All right.
I've got a question for Michael, if I could.
Sure.
So you mentioned you don't generally take a guitar for sale these days. It sounded like you show up with one guitar to show, and is that generally enough for you? Do you feel like a certain builder is going to do themselves a detriment by not having 2, 3, 4 instruments, whatever it may be, as well as something that is actually available to buy that day?
Yes, I think depending on the builder, it can be a detriment. And it's not my preference to have one guitar. It's my preference to have 2 or 3. But sometimes I may just only have one available, or if I'm traveling internationally, I don't want to travel with 2 sample guitars just because of the logistics kind of thing.
Michael, your guitars are fairly similar too, though, aren't they? Like you could, I mean, you don't do 5 different designs, do you?
Well, I have 4.
Okay.
Yeah, I have 4 different models.
Okay.
But and if there were none of these, like kind of say restrictions in place, or the reality of my business, then yeah, ideally I would go to a show and I would
4
have
guitars.
I would have 4 guitars, 4 models.
Mhm.
That would be ideal, but that's just not the reality for me. And
Right. Well, and the reason I go ahead.
Oh, please go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, the reason I ask, it's the same thing for me. It's like Isaac had mentioned, dropping everything 2 or 3 months before a show to focus on that instrument to get it ready for the show. That's a struggle for me. I've got other customers that are waiting on guitars that I couldn't be comfortable dropping their instruments so I can work on something that is initially for me to go market myself with, as well as rent that still needs to be paid in that amount of time. So it's easier for me to, seems that it would be easier for me to have, be it, an instrument I've built for someone that I could borrow and take to show rather than build 3 guitars that are unspoken for on speculation and have them available, and then top that off with the fact that they're going to come home with pick scratches and things, cable marks in the neck and everything as well is kind of a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. There's definitely a balance in there. It would really just depend on the individual and kind of where they're at, and if they have the time to make some spec guitars for a show. So,
And I guess what I'm asking, if they kind of don't, are they better off just avoiding this until they could, or would it be beneficial at all to show up at an event like this as a newer builder, younger builder, someone with less name recognition, and just have a couple instruments to show rather than something that is available to buy?
yeah, in my opinion, if you're looking at the long-term game here, I still think it would be worthwhile. And Travis, you made me think of another point that I wanted to get to, which goes back to Doug's comment earlier about the expensive shows, especially for newer builders. And a lot of the shows actually they fill up. So it's harder for a newer builder to sometimes to get into the best shows. Like Woodstock would fill up every year, and I believe La Conner was not full this year. And so, as Isaac said, how he had to you know, kind of put some extra effort into getting into that first show. That's something that newer builders on the market also have to kind of work their way into. And there's a lot of smaller regional shows, and that's often a good place to start. And I'm not ashamed to tell you that I once exhibited at a local battle of the bands. So
Yeah, yeah. It's like doing stand up at an open mic or something. You gotta.
yeah, got to start somewhere.
Michael, do you think there's an argument to be made for guys like you to continue to do shows just to support the overall health of the ecosystem? I mean, like
Yes,
yeah.
I do. I think there is, and I wouldn't put myself in that category. But for example, like the Rocky Mountain Archtop Show, which is happening in September. For example, like Linda Manzer, who is about as high up in the Mount Rushmore builders as you can get. I mean, she doesn't need to come to that show.
Mhm.
Certainly not to sell guitars, but I think she likes to, not only support the show, but literally support like the craft.
Yeah.
And the market. And so I do think it's really good when really well, highly established builders can go to these shows, and they don't need the sales. They probably don't need to be there for business reasons, but it's good for, I think, to keep the the community kind of alive and help keep the shows going.
And they get to hang out with their friends.
Yes. Yeah. So
Cool. All right. Should we conclude it there, you think? Any other questions? All right.
all right. Well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate it.
Can we
And,
Can we get everybody to unmute and thank Michael and Chris and in spirit Isaac for doing this?
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, everyone.
everybody.
Thanks for your time, guys.
Thank you, guys.
And Duluth Along is in full
Thanks,
effect,
guys.
guys.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.